Hello and welcome to another episode of the Prog Report Reacts. My name is Kyle Fagala, and today we're going to be talking about a band that most people have really not considered to be a progressive rock or progressive metal band for many, many years, and I think that's because of how the band started. But as far as the last two albums now have gone, they are a progressive band, and that band is Avenged Sevenfold. And so if you've not listened to The Stage, it was a surprise album they did back in I think 2016 at this point. I could be wrong about that. But that was a progressive album. It was it had a concept to it, dealing with space, and really a great album, and did not do all that well. So you need to go check that one out. But their latest album that just came out last week is called Life Is But a Dream. It came out on June 2nd, and it is very progressive, certainly their most progressive, and they're getting a lot of pushback from their fans because it's maybe not the Avenged Sevenfold they were hoping for. Well, I got to tell you, it's the Avenged Sevenfold I've been hoping for. I think for several albums now, they've had elements of prog here and there, even though they started as really like an admittedly like metalcore kind of band, which is not exactly my thing. But they've continued to lean more and more into sort of the Dream Theater influences that they have. And they're always going to have that kind of like Guns N' Roses, like kind of straight ahead rock sound. But on this album, and I have listened to it once, so this will not be my first listen to this song, but I wanted to identify the song that I thought would work best for this and go for that. And so I'm going to be reacting to the song Cosmic, which at least for me on first listen was the best song and definitely had some prog elements. But anyway, go check out the album. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I think some of those in our group have loved it. Some of those in our group have hated it. I think for a lot of people that maybe love prog, M. Shadow's voice is something they either like or they don't. That seems to be the issue, at least that I've run into. I really like it. So let's get into the song because it's a long one. I think it's about 7.5 minutes long, and so we're going to need all the time we can get. Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to go ahead and start that. We don't have a video. This is just a visualizer, but who cares? We're going to listen to the music. Here we go.
From all that was before, we shut another door, but not a last goodbye. Fate is taken once again, a fight we'll never win, and time again we try. Left alone, I can't wait too long. Fate. Love, we love so many times and in so many lives. Sometimes we got it right. It found its way back in until we meet again into that good night. None too far as we chase through the stars beyond forever. I'll follow you.
All right, sorry. Let me get to talking a little bit before we get into this section. So that was about 2 minutes of just sort of like a little bit of a slow build. If you're listening to this sort of a song on headphones, you're going to pick up on a lot of, and this is true of this album in general, is that they spend a lot of time with kind of like the spatial mixing, you might say, of how sounds kind of come in and out from left to right, and stuff just sounds great. The snare drum, I'm always talking about drums, but the snare drum sounds enormous. There's a little bit of like almost like an images and words sort of kind of balance here. It's a Dream Theater album. for anyone who's an Avenged Sevenfold that doesn't like Dream Theater, go listen to Dream Theater. A lot of this reminds me of that, but I love kind of, even though that I know that there's more to this song, again, I've heard this already, there's more to this song coming that is cooler. I like this opening vibe, and I sort of like, thing I like about this album in particular is there's a sort of, well, at its nature, there's an effort to experiment and to do something different. But there also is a sort of like coming to grips with sort of the banality of life. And I don't know kind of spiritually or religiously what their points of view are, but it's almost like from a somewhat like nihilistic or cynical point of view. Obviously, you look at the drawing and it's of the Grim Reaper, and that's all throughout all their art and this visualizer, this sort of like really like modern art, sort of sketched style. I really like. I think it's very cool. It almost feels like the drawings of like an insane person a little bit. But I dig that, and I like that it's just in black on sort of a parchment paper. I think that visual kind of helps to sort of bring this album together a little bit. Maybe the art on the albums doesn't speak to you, but it always speaks to me. I love art, so yeah. I also did not mention band member names, so for what it's worth, the guy singing M Shadows, rhythm guitarist Zachy Vengeance, lead guitarist Sinister Gates, bassist Johnny Christ. Those are not their given names, I'm guessing. And then drummer Brooks Wackerman. I feel like Brooks's name feels really out of sorts, and should they have renamed him Brooks EB or something? Brooks Wackerman, incredible drummer. Okay, so this is where the song builds, and then they're going to start to add in all sorts of influences along the way. For me, at least, this is where it gets pretty interesting. So here we go. Reverb on the guitar. Love it. Big change right there. And in the headphones, it makes the change. It's almost sort of like an explosion, I guess, of sorts.
Dancing in the wind, these roses born again. There you'll find me before the dawn of man, in castles made of sand. There you'll find me, riding in the caves that fire lights the way. There you'll find me, masquerade.
All right, so just to sort of pause here for a second. Obviously, we had sort of an opening section, sort of, down tempo a little bit more muted. Great vocal performance during that stage. And then move into a couple more minutes, maybe a minute and a half, really up tempo, incredible solos, sweep picking, really great mix on that. And then we have sort of our, big like sonic boom explosion moment where it kind of decays into this almost like, feels like a funeral march in some ways. We've got horns going on. Looks like we got a little demon there playing the violin. I don't know if he's in the mix or not. But really like three different sounding, bands here already in like 4 minutes. And so, in this music, there's almost like a little bit of like David Bowie, like kind of spaciness, atmosphericness. Definitely some Guns N' Roses there in that kind of like up-tempo part, I think. And in this part, especially the way that M Shadows approaches the vocals, kind of in that little bit lower register, I think it feels like that. But I'm also just noticing from a mixing standpoint, like how they produce this, each of these sections has sounded like totally different, which is a really interesting way to approach this. To me, that feels very progressive, kind of in approaching it as such. But let's see where we head on into. I think, if I recall, this is where they start to incorporate some really bat crazy stuff. But let's get back into it.
Don't embarrass close. There you'll find me. Let it go. Rings of dust and ice, weightless in the night. There you'll find me. Let it go.
Hear the sound of like strings, it's almost like the sound of a rocket taking off. It's kind of distorted. Cinematic. Ooh. Of course, it builds to a point and then it kind of stops. Now we're hearing like a little bit of like kind of techno vibe going on. All right, so that is cool. So now we've moved into a whole other section. This part actually reminds me a whole lot of Daft Punk. I was never a huge Daft Punk fan, never really been into techno or house music or whatever you want to kind of identify that as. But Random Access Memories, 2009, that album by them, one of my favorite albums of all time. I think it's like an absolute masterpiece. There's a song at the end of that album. What is it called? It is called, was it like Liftoff or something? That's not it. Come on, Wikipedia. Contact. Yeah, Contact. And it's got sort of like, the thing I like about the album is that I think it's progressive to do this for what it's worth. And I wouldn't say that's a progressive album, but there are some elements of that. But they have like, almost like scenes or like talking or sound effects kind of built into it. And it's like the sound of, a rocket taking off. And to me, that build there in the middle of this song is sort of reminiscent of that. And then we go into something that could kind of sound like it's on, Daft Punk album, maybe with some auto-tune or whatever. But you've got those really blown out, like almost like rototoms that Brooks is playing that are like real spaced out, but sound huge, along with this, man, admittedly like kind of techno, like super digital sounding part. So what are we, 5.5 minutes in? I feel like we've got like 4 very distinct song parts, but let's see how this thing finishes out. All right, then kind of come back very end with sort of like a string quartet kind of thing. Really, strong cello part there at the end. I don't know if you like that. I think it's awesome. I think that's great. I cannot believe the band Avenged Sevenfold has written and recorded that and released that into the wild, because I love that. Again, there's like so many different things going on in so many different sections. For me, ultimately, that song really does remind me of, again, Random Access Memories. Yeah, that's the album with Get Lucky by Pharrell on it. And there's even other parts of other songs, like they have a suite of songs called God or God, and each of those letters stands for something else. But there's a part in there that definitely sounds like that. And so, I'd understand why people wouldn't like that. Avenged Sevenfold is one of these bands that's been accused for not being metal enough in certain ways, and or being like, kind of like a hot topic band or whatever. But I gotta say, I respect them for taking the time to experiment and to find something that is definitely new and different for them, and that to me feels fresh, and it feels like what progressive rock should be. It should be trying to progress the genre of rock, and as it were for Avenged Sevenfold, whatever the heck you want to call them, is sort of like a new wave of American metal from 2000s on. I feel like they're doing something progressive here, and so it doesn't feel like it's iterative of Genesis, Yes, King Crimson. It feels like it's sort of like an expansion upon the Metallica and the Dream Theater and the Guns N' Roses and all the other musical influences that they have that have led to something I feel like that feels new and unique. And then even being able to mix in things like perhaps Daft Punk, and that may not be their guiding kind of landmark musically. That's what I hear. I think the drums are great. I think the Rev was an incredible drummer, but I do feel like Brooks on this album, but specifically this track, has definitely made it his own. He's sort of able to pay homage to the Rev in the way that he drummed, but putting his own twist and spin on it as well. This is one I'll be listening to a lot in the coming years, I feel. But curious to see what you think about it. Again, you may hate it. You may not like it. You may be thinking, I don't know, I hear some prog stuff, but I don't know, maybe it's just avant-garde and it's not prog to you. And what does it really matter, right? But I highly recommend listening to it. Like I said, I did this after listening to it once because I wasn't expecting a progressive album from it, but I had heard some good stuff. I listened to it and I was like, oh man, I got to do a reaction video to this song, and this was my favorite. They had a single called Nobody. It came out a couple months ago, but it's good. It doesn't sound quite as progressive as this one does, and so I love this one. So anyway, that's what I have. This is Avenged Sevenfold Cosmic. Check out the rest of the new album, and we'll be back with more reaction videos very soon, I'm sure. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Kyle Fagala. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.